I'd like to welcome you to the House, Minister, and on behalf of Labour to welcome this bill. We're very supportive of it, and indeed it does have cross-party support, which is very welcome. And as others have said, and indeed you've acknowledged yourself, Minister, it's very eagerly awaited and anticipated, in particular by those parents who are looking forward to the extension of the parents' leave from 2 to 5 weeks paid leave, and of course for the expansion of the category of children to whom, who are covered from the first year to the first 2 years of a child's life. So those are very welcome changes. And indeed the other changes that you've outlined are also very welcome. The fact that the bill will rectify, as you've said, the anomaly in the current legislation which left married male same-sex couples unable to avail of adoptive leave. So that's very welcome. And indeed also welcome is the change, the removal of the presumption that the adoptive mother is the primary caregiver. I think that's a very positive and indeed a progressive change, and I would commend you on that. I would say, of course, it's unfortunate that we've had such a short time to look at it, given how recently it was published and the changes. But I do want to express thanks to the Library and Research Service. I'm sure all of us have found their briefing very helpful, and they've certainly given us a good contextual background. And a lot of us will be very conscious of the background to this. I would also say, Minister, that I know you've indicated you'll be making amendments further on. I think perhaps you might clarify that at committee stage here in the Seanad or at a later date. You'll be making amendments to bring in the personal injury guidelines, and in keeping with comments that I and others have made over many different debates and legislation, I think it's unfortunate that we're going to see totally unrelated amendments included in this very important family leave bill. I know that these are pressing matters. We certainly won't be opposing the amendments because we recognise their urgency, and we indeed recognise the urgency of this legislation itself. But I do think, as a matter of good legislative practice and drafting practice, it's not ideal that these amendments would be in a different and unrelated bill. Others have pointed out that this bill is being introduced in International Women's Week, and of course it is an important measure for gender equality, although I absolutely agree with Senator O'Reilly's comments that childcare should not be seen as a burden, and nor should it be seen as a burden for women. And it's frustrating that that language tends to creep in. But we know that across the EU that typically men do have lower uptake of parental leave generally than women, where it's available to both. And it is obviously positive that parents' leave is available on a gender-neutral basis. But we know that men have a lower uptake than women, and I think we might say it's due to the two C's, it's cash and culture, that are the two big issues that tend to create a situation where women or mothers are more likely to take the leave than fathers. The culture in which fathers are it's less common for fathers to take leave, and indeed the fact that men tend to earn more than women, and that therefore it's more of a financial loss certainly to a heterosexual couple where the man takes leave and the woman does not, and that's issues about the rate of pay, of course, of the leave. So I do think that while welcoming this legislation very much, we do need to recognise the need for other changes also, a cultural change. And Minister, I would ask if there's any proposal at government perhaps to highlight the fact that this leave will be available on a gender-neutral basis, and to try and challenge stereotypes whereby childcare is always seen as a woman's responsibility. And in keeping or in parallel with that addressing the cultural barriers to men taking parental leave, also to address the cash barrier. And I'm very glad that you've indicated, indeed on Monday you indicated here in the Seanad, that you'd be bringing forward the amendments to the gender pay gap information legislation within the next 2 weeks. And I very much welcome that, because that's a real gap in our laws at present. We simply don't have legislative means for tackling this ongoing issue where women are paid less than men. I do also want to address just a couple of other issues around family leave more generally. I've been recently involved in the Athena Swan process at third level, the gender equality benchmarking process in Trinity. And I know one of the issues that arises across all third level institutions, and it's certainly not unique to third level, is the issue of a right, not just of a right of return to work after availing of parental or maternity leave, but that how employees are treated when they return is crucial. So we see in academia, for example, a pattern whereby those who return from family leave or maternity leave, typically women, will really miss out on promotional opportunities because they lack the research time. They're straight back into full teaching and admin loads, and they lack the time to carry out the research that, particularly around the 30s, is what makes the difference between promotion or non-promotion in academic settings. So that's just one example of a particular workplace setting. But undoubtedly across different professions, and again from research I and others have done in law, we've seen this phenomenon: postponed parenting, women putting off having children till later in careers, till their careers is got to a certain stage, but then missing out on promotional opportunities, because while rights to return to work are enshrined in law, there's no right to any sort of phased or incremental lessening of duties on return. I put it out there. I'm not sure that legislation is the appropriate place in which to make provision for that, but it's something that I think within the Athena Swan Charter there's a real awareness about this, and there's a growing tendency now for different institutions to adopt measures to facilitate women returning from maternity leave, or indeed employees returning from parental leave, to buy out teaching time or to make some provision that they can that they haven't missed out on promotional opportunities because they took leave. So I think that's again about culture too, and that's a difficult one to address through legislation. I just want to finally address the issue that, again, Senator O'Reilly mentioned, and I thank her for expressing her support for a bill that I introduced here in this House on Monday, and I'm hoping we'll have time to debate it over the next month or so here in the Seanad, and that is a new reproductive health-related leave bill that I introduced, really having been inspired to do so by the work of Councillor Alison Gilliland and the Irish National Teachers Organisation, the INTO, and I spoke about this on Monday. This is a bill to provide, for the first time, specific recognition to those employees who need to take time off work because they've suffered early miscarriage or other reproductive health related reasons to take leave. For example, because they've needed to take time off work to undergo IVF treatment. So this is a gendered issue, although our bill is gender neutral in its framing, but it is a gendered issue because, again, this is something that impacts more on women. We know from European Court of Justice case law that it's unlawful gender discrimination to discriminate against a woman who's taken sick leave to undergo IVF treatment. But we think, and the INTO research shows, that there's a need to give specific recognition to this. So we've brought forward a bill to provide for up to 10 days leave for reproductive health related reasons, up to 20 days leave for early miscarriage, which again, prior to the 24th week of pregnancy, is not recognised specifically in law. And I'd ask you, Minister, to look favourably upon this. I know Senator Regina Doherty has spoken very favourably about this principle, and we'd be very happy to work with government on trying to get this principle into law, and I know the INTO will be too. And I would say very finally that I very much welcome the fact that we're going to see provision in law for ministers to take maternity leave. I don't think there's any need for constitutional amendment. I think Article 28(12) of the Constitution gives plenty of scope simply for this to be done through legislation. But I think it's a really progressive step and in keeping with the spirit of this bill, which I again welcome.